The October wind carried a chill that cut straight through my wool coat as I pushed open the heavy glass door of Autumn Brewcaf. The familiar scent of cinnamon and freshly ground coffee beans wrapped around me like a warm embrace. And I felt my shoulders finally relax for the first time all day. This little corner cafe on Newberry Street had become my sanctuary over the past 3 years, a place where I could lose myself in my art, where the world outside seemed to fade away, and where I had carefully rebuilt the pieces of my shattered heart. I had sworn to myself, on that devastating December night 3 years ago, that I would never allow Marcus Wellington back into my life. Never again would I let that man with his piercing gray eyes and his ruthless ambition tear apart everything I thought I knew about love. I had built walls around my heart so high and so strong that I was certain nothing could breach them. But, as I settled into my usual corner table, that crisp autumn afternoon, sketching the golden maple leaves that danced outside the window, I had no idea that my carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down all over again. The memories of Harvard still haunted me sometimes. Marcus had been everything I thought I wanted: brilliant, driven, impossibly handsome in that way that made other students turn their heads when he walked across the campus quad. I was studying fine arts, spending my days covered in paint and charcoal, dreaming of gallery exhibitions and artistic recognition. He was in the business school, already networking with Fortune 500 executives and planning his empire before he'd even graduated. We were complete opposites, and maybe that's what made it so intoxicating. Our first meeting had been completely accidental. I was carrying a large canvas across the courtyard, when a sudden gust of wind caught it like a sail, nearly knocking me over. Marcus appeared out of nowhere, his strong hands steadying both me and my painting. "Careful there, Picasso," he had said with that devastating smile, and I was lost from that very first moment. We spent that entire afternoon talking under the ancient oak trees, sharing our dreams and ambitions like we'd known each other our whole lives. What followed was the most intense romance of my life. Marcus would skip his corporate finance classes to watch me paint, sitting quietly in the corner of the art studio with his laptop, supposedly working on business plans but really just studying my every movement. I would sneak into his lectures, fascinated by the way his mind worked, how he could analyze market trends and predict consumer behavior with an accuracy that seemed almost supernatural. We were building something beautiful together, a future that combined his business acumen with my artistic vision. The proposal came during our senior year, on a snow-covered December evening, under those same oak trees where we'd first talked. It wasn't a ring. Marcus knew I would have hated something so traditional. Instead, he gave me a key to a loft in Boston's South End, a space with floor-to-ceiling windows and north-facing lights, perfect for a studio. "Build your empire here," he had whispered against my ear, "while I build mine right beside you." I said yes without hesitation, completely certain that we could conquer the world together. But then Goldman Sachs offered him a position in New York that was too good to refuse, a fast track to senior management, 7 figures within 5 years, everything he had ever dreamed of. But catch, he had to start immediately after graduation. No time for a wedding, no time to wait for me to finish my graduate program, no time for the life we had planned in Boston. "It's just 2 years," he had promised, holding my face in his hands like I was something precious. "2 years and I'll have enough saved for us to do whatever we want. You can have your gallery, your studio, everything." I believed him. I was young and in love and naive enough to think that promises made in passion were unbreakable. I watched him pack his life into boxes, watched him drive away in that black BMW his father had given him for graduation, watched my entire future disappear down Interstate 95. The phone calls came regularly at first, good morning texts, late night conversations about his demanding schedule and my thesis project, but gradually, the calls became shorter, less frequent. He was networking with clients, working 8-hour days, climbing that corporate ladder one ruthless rung at a time. The final blow came 6 months later, not through a phone call or even a text, but through a photograph on social media. Marcus, at some charity gala in Manhattan, devastatingly handsome in a black tuxedo, his arm around a stunning brunette in a designer gown. The caption read, "Power Couple Goals," and it felt like a knife straight through my chest. When I called him that night, crying and demanding an explanation, his response was cold, clinical, like he was delivering a quarterly earnings report. "I can't do long distance anymore. My career demands all my focus right now." You understand, don't you? You've always been so independent, independent. The word tasted bitter in my mouth for months afterward. He made it sound like a compliment, but I knew the truth. I had become an inconvenience, a complication in his perfectly orchestrated rise to power. The engagement was over, our future was cancelled, and Marcus Wellington moved on like I had never existed at all. I threw myself into my art with a desperate fury, painting canvases filled with rage and heartbreak, pouring all my pain into swirls of black and red that gallery visitors would later describe as hauntingly beautiful and emotionally devastating. How I ended up in Boston, in this little café, 3 years later. I had graduated with my MFA, had my first solo exhibition, was making a modest living selling paintings to collectors who appreciated work that came from raw, authentic emotion. I had convinced myself that I was over Marcus Wellington, that the girl who had loved him so desperately was just a memory. A cautionary tale I told myself about the dangers of trusting someone with your entire heart. I was independent, just like he'd said. I was strong. I was completely, utterly over him. If you're feeling the intensity of this heartbreak like I did that day, drop the word betrayal in the comments below. And if you want to hear how this story unfolds, make sure you're subscribed, because you won't believe what happens next. Until that October afternoon when the cafe door chimed, and I looked up from my sketchpad to see Marcus Wellington standing in the doorway like a ghost from my past, looking more devastatingly handsome than I remembered, his gray eyes scanning the room until they found mine. My pencil slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the wooden floor, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe. He was supposed to be in New York, supposed to be climbing corporate ladders and attending charity galas with beautiful brunettes in designer gowns. He wasn't supposed to be here, in my sanctuary, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Hello, Emma," he said, his voice exactly as I remembered, deep, confident, with that slight rasp that used to make my knees weak. He approached my table slowly, like he was afraid I might bolt, and maybe he was right to be cautious. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to grab my things and disappear before he could destroy me all over again. But I was frozen, trapped between the window and his intense gaze, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Marcus, his name felt foreign on my tongue, like a word in a language I had forgotten how to speak. "What are you doing here?" The question came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't apologize. I had learned not to apologize for my emotions, not after spending months in therapy learning how to rebuild my self-worth from the ground up. "I was in the neighborhood," he said, and even as the words left his mouth, I could see he knew how ridiculous they sounded. Marcus Wellington didn't just happen to be in neighborhoods like this, neighborhoods filled with vintage bookstores and independent cafes and struggling artists like me. His world was all glass towers and leather boardrooms and exclusive restaurants where you needed a reservation 3 months in advance. "Try again," I said, closing my sketchpad with a snap. I wouldn't let him see the drawings I'd been working on, landscapes of the New England countryside, peaceful scenes that had nothing to do with him or the chaos he represented. And this time, try being honest. "I know it's not your strong suit, but give it a shot." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or regret. "You're right to be angry with me," he said, pulling out the chair across from me without invitation. "You have every right to hate me." "I don't hate you," I said, and it was true. Hate was too passionate, too consuming. What I felt for Marcus was something colder, more final, indifference, carefully cultivated over 3 years of deliberate forgetting. "I just don't care about you anymore." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I held his gaze steadily, daring him to challenge me. He studied my face for a long moment, those gray eyes that had once known every secret, every dream, every fear I'd ever harbored. I had forgotten how intense his attention could be, how he looked at everything, including me, like he was analyzing a complex business problem that he was determined to solve. "Fair enough," he said finally, signaling the barista for a coffee. "Then, you won't mind if I become a regular here. I'm in Boston for a while, and this place has excellent reviews online." I stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. I've always appreciated good coffee." He leaned back in his chair like he owned the place, like he belonged in this little bohemian cafe with its mismatched furniture and local art covering the walls. Everything about his presence here was wrong. His perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his expensive watch, the way he commanded attention without even trying. He was a predator in a room full of prey, and I was the one he had locked in his sights. There are dozens of coffee shops in Boston, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. I'm sure you can find one that better suits your refined tastes. Probably, he agreed with that infuriating half-smile I remembered too well, but I like this one. Besides, the view is spectacular. His eyes never left my face as he said it, and I felt heat rise up my neck despite my best efforts to remain unaffected. The next 2 weeks were torture. True to his word, Marcus became a regular at Autumn Brew, showing up every afternoon around 3 o'clock with his laptop and his phone, conducting what sounded like important business calls while positioning himself at a table with perfect sightlines to my corner. I tried changing my schedule, coming earlier or later, but somehow he always seemed to anticipate my moves. It was like a game of chess where he was always 3 steps ahead. I told myself I could handle this. I was a grown woman, not the college girl who had fallen for his charm. I could share space with my ex-fiancé without falling apart. But Marcus wasn't making it easy. He seemed determined to remind me of everything I had loved about him. His quick wit when he overheard me struggling with a client on the phone. His thoughtful gesture of having the barista save me the last blueberry muffin when I arrived later than usual. The way he quietly handled a group of rowdy college students who were disturbing my work. You don't have to do that, I told him after he'd convinced the students to move their study session to a table farther from my corner. Do what? He asked innocently, but there was nothing innocent about the way he was looking at me. Play the protective boyfriend. That's not your role anymore. I never said it was. He slid into the seat across from me, uninvited as always, but those kids were being inconsiderate, and you looked like you were about to throw your paintbrush at them. He wasn't wrong. I had been ready to abandon my usual conflict avoidance tactics and tell those students exactly what I thought about their volume level. But that didn't mean I needed Marcus swooping in to rescue me like some corporate knight in shining armor. I can handle my own problems, I said firmly. I know you can. You always could. There was something wistful in his voice that caught me off guard. That was one of the things I admired most about you. Your strength, your independence. There was that word again, independence. But this time it didn't sound like a dismissal. This time it sounded like a compliment, like something he genuinely valued rather than something that had become inconvenient for his ambitions. I know some of you are probably wondering if I'm crazy for even listening to him after what he put me through. Trust me, I was asking myself the same question every single day. But there's something you need to understand about Marcus. He doesn't do anything without a purpose, without a strategy. His presence in my cafe wasn't coincidental, and his sudden interest in excellent coffee reviews wasn't genuine. He was planning something, building towards some greater objective, and despite my better judgment, I found myself curious about what it might be. Don't worry though, the real revelations are just beginning. So make sure you're subscribed because what I discovered next changed everything I thought I knew about why he left. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening when I was working late, trying to finish a commission piece for a collector in Cambridge. Most of the cafe had cleared out, just me and the evening shift barista who was more interested in her textbook than monitoring customer behavior. I was completely absorbed in mixing the perfect shade of burnt orange for an autumn sunset when I heard Marcus's voice from across the room, speaking in hushed, urgent tones into his phone. No, I told you, I'm not coming back to New York. I don't care what the merger requires, because I can't leave Boston right now. That's why, It's personal, David. For the first time in my life, it's personal, and you're just going to have to handle the Shanghai deal without me. My paintbrush froze halfway to the canvas. Marcus never, ever put personal considerations ahead of business. It was one of the fundamental truths of his character. Like gravity or the rising sun, business came first, always, without exception. It's what had destroyed us 3 years ago, and it's what had driven every major decision he'd made since college. Hearing him tell someone, presumably David Chen, his business partner and closest friend, that he was prioritizing something personal was like hearing him speak in a foreign language. I know what I said about the timeline, he continued, his voice strained with an emotion I'd never heard from him before, something that sounded almost like desperation. But I was wrong, okay? I was wrong about a lot of things, and I'm trying to fix them now, while I still can. No, she doesn't know yet. She barely tolerates my presence. What do you mean? What's my endgame? My endgame is convincing the woman I love that I'm not the same selfish bastard who walked away from her 3 years ago. The paintbrush slipped from my fingers, leaving a streak of orange across my palette. Marcus was still talking, but his words had become background noise to the thundering of my own heartbeat. He was here for me, not for business, not for some strategic corporate maneuver, but for me. The realization should have felt like vindication, like proof that I had been right to suspect his motives. But instead, it felt like vertigo, like the ground had shifted beneath my feet, and I was falling through space with nothing to grab onto. I must have made some sound, knocked over my water jar, or scraped my chair against the floor, because suddenly Marcus's conversation stopped and he was looking directly at me. Even across the dimly lit cafe, I could see the moment he realized I had overheard him, could see the calculation in his expression as he quickly ended his call and started walking toward my table. "Emma," he began, but I was already packing up my supplies, my hands shaking as I tried to cap my paint tubes and clean my brushes. "Don't," I said, without looking at him. "Whatever you're about to say, just don't." "You heard." It wasn't a question. I finally looked up at him, and what I saw in his face, vulnerability, fear, desperate hope, almost undid me completely. This wasn't the composed, confident Marcus Wellington I had known in college, or the cold, ambitious stranger who had broken my heart over the phone 3 years ago. This was someone I had never seen before, someone who looked like he was holding his breath, waiting for me to decide his fate. "I heard enough," I said, standing up so abruptly that my chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "You gave up a merger for this. Some kind of romantic grand gesture that you think will make me forget how you abandoned me." "It's not a gesture," he said quietly. "It's the truth. I love you, Emma. I never stopped loving you, and I've spent 3 years trying to convince myself that business success could fill the hole you left in my life. It can't stop." The word came out sharper than I intended, cutting through the space between us like a blade. "You don't get to do this, Marcus. You don't get to show up here after 3 years and expect me to fall back into your arms because you finally realized that money can't buy happiness. That's not how this works." "I know," he said, and his voice was so soft I almost didn't hear him. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be undone. But I had to try, Emma. I had to try because the alternative is spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I had been brave enough to fight for us." The worst part was that I could see he meant every word. The Marcus I had known in college had been passionate but guarded, ambitious but careful with his emotions. This version of him was raw, exposed, like he had stripped away all the corporate armor he usually wore and was standing before me completely defenseless. It should have felt like victory, seeing him vulnerable, seeing him hurt the way he had hurt me. Instead, it just felt like more confusion piled on top of the chaos he had already created in my carefully ordered life. "I need to go," I said, shouldering my odd bag and heading for the door, but Marcus caught my arm gently, his fingers barely touching my elbow, but somehow stopping me in my tracks. "There's something else," he said. "Something you need to know about why I really came back to Boston." I should have pulled away. I should have walked out of that cafe and never looked back. But there was something in his voice, a weight to his words that suggested whatever he was about to tell me would change everything I thought I understood about our past. "What?" I whispered, hating myself for caring, for needing to know. "Not here," he said, glancing around the cafe where the barista was now openly eavesdropping on our conversation. "There's too much to explain, and you deserve to hear all of it. Will you have dinner with me tomorrow night? Just dinner, just conversation. I promise I won't ask for anything more than that." Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to say no, to walk away, to protect the life I had built from the wreckage of our relationship. But there was something in his eyes, some shadow of pain that I recognized because I had lived with it myself for 3 years, that made me hesitate. "One dinner," I said finally, "one conversation, and then you leave me alone. If that's what you want after you hear what I have to say." He agreed. "Then yes, I'll leave you alone." I walked home through the crisp October night, fallen leaves crunching under my feet, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Marcus Wellington, the man who had taught me that love was a luxury he couldn't afford, was claiming he had given up a major business deal to stay in Boston and win me back. It felt impossible, like discovering that gravity had decided to work in reverse, or that the sun had chosen to rise in the west. But even as I told myself that this was just another manipulation, another strategic move in whatever game he was playing, I couldn't shake the memory of how he had looked when he thought I might walk away, like a man who was drowning, and I was the only life preserver in sight. Whatever had brought Marcus back to Boston, whatever truth he was so desperate to tell me, it had changed him in ways I was only beginning to understand. The restaurant Marcus had chosen for our dinner was exactly the kind of place I should have expected: understated elegance, tables spaced far enough apart for private conversation, the sort of establishment where important business was conducted over expertly prepared meals. But as I sat across from him in the soft candlelight, I noticed details that surprised me. He had requested a table by the window, remembering how I always preferred natural light. He had arrived early and was already sipping what looked like club soda instead of the scotch he used to favor. And when I mentioned that I had become pescatarian since college, he immediately suggested we order from the seafood menu instead of the steakhouse specialties he had always preferred. "You're different," I said after we had placed our orders and settled into the kind of careful politeness that felt like walking across a minefield. "Different how?" he asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew what I meant. "Quieter, more present, I guess. In college, you were always multitasking, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Tonight you seem like you're actually here." Something shifted in his face. Relief, maybe, or gratitude that I had noticed. "I am here," he said simply. "For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be, doing exactly what I want to be doing, which is sitting across from the most beautiful, talented, infuriating woman I've ever known, hoping she'll give me a chance to explain the biggest mistake of my life." I took a sip of wine, buying myself time to process his words. "So explain." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the Boston skyline twinkling in the darkness. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I had ever heard it, almost hesitant. "Do you remember what I told you about my parents, about their marriage?" I nodded. Marcus's parents had been what people politely called a power couple. His father a prominent attorney, his mother a successful investment banker. Their marriage had been a merger of ambitions rather than hearts. A strategic alliance that produced 2 successful children and a flawlessly run household, while remaining completely devoid of genuine affection. "I swore I would never have that kind of relationship," he continued. "Cold, transactional, more like a business partnership than a marriage. But somewhere along the way, I started thinking that maybe they had the right idea. Maybe love was a weakness, something that made you vulnerable and unfocused. Maybe success required sacrifice. And the biggest sacrifice was letting yourself need another person. So you decided to sacrifice us," I said, trying to keep the old hurt out of my voice. "I thought I was protecting us both," he said, finally, meeting my eyes. "I thought if I could just focus on building my career for a few years, I could create the kind of financial security that would let us have everything we wanted. No struggles, no compromises, no difficult choices between love and ambition. That wasn't your choice to make alone, Marcus. We were supposed to be partners. I know that now. But at the time, all I could see was the opportunity slipping away, and I was terrified that if I didn't grab it immediately, it would never come again. I was 22, and arrogant and absolutely certain that I could have it all if I just planned it perfectly. Our food arrived, but neither of us touched it. The conversation had taken on a momentum of its own, like water breaking through a dam, releasing years of unspoken truths. "What changed?" I asked. "Why are you here now, telling me this?" Marcus's laugh was hollow, bitter. "My parents died, Emma. Car accident on the Mass Pike, 18 months ago. They were coming back from some charity function, probably spent the whole drive discussing tax strategies or investment portfolios. Very efficient, very practical, very much in character for them." I felt a stab of genuine sympathy cut through my anger. Whatever my feelings about Marcus, I had liked his parents, respected their achievements, even if I had never felt warmth from them. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I didn't tell anyone who didn't need to know for business purposes," he said. "But losing them, it broke something in me, Emma. Not because we were close, we weren't, not really, but because I realized I was turning into them. I had this corner office overlooking Central Park, a 7-figure salary, invitations to every important event. In the city, I was everything I had ever dreamed of becoming. and I was completely, utterly miserable. He picked up his water glass, stared into it like he was reading tea leaves. I would go to these networking events, surrounded by successful, beautiful people, and all I could think about was how you used to make fun of that kind of scene. How you would have found something genuine to laugh about. Some small detail that would have made the whole pretentious affair bearable. I missed your laugh, Emma. I missed the way you saw the world, the way you found beauty in things that other people overlooked. I could feel my carefully constructed defenses beginning to crack, and I hated him for it. This was exactly what I had been afraid of, that he would find the right words, the right approach, the perfect strategy to work his way back into my heart, just when I had finally learned to live without him. Missing me doesn't erase what you did, I said. It doesn't change the fact that you threw away our entire future for a job. You're absolutely right, he said, and his immediate agreement caught me off guard. Missing you doesn't fix anything. It doesn't earn your forgiveness or entitle me to a second chance, but it's the reason I liquidated my partnership, sold my apartment, and moved back to Boston. It's the reason I've spent the last 6 months learning everything I could about your career, your exhibitions, your life here. I stared at him. You've been watching me for 6 months. Not watching, he said quickly, seeing the alarm in my expression. Researching. I hired a private investigator to make sure you were okay, to find out if you were, if there was someone else in your life. I know how that sounds, and I know it was a violation of your privacy, but I needed to know if I had any chance at all before I turned my entire life upside down. That's creepy, Marcus. That's really, really creepy. I know, it is, but Emma, I also bought 4 of your paintings. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. What? The gallery on Charles Street, the one that represents you. They've been selling your work to an anonymous collector for the past 2 years. That's me. I have them hanging in my apartment here in Boston. Not some sterile showpieces, but because they're beautiful and they remind me of why I fell in love with you in the first place. I sat back in my chair, trying to process this information. For paintings that represented thousands of dollars in sales, a significant portion of my income over the past 2 years. Sales that had allowed me to quit my part-time job at the art supply store and focus on my work full-time. The Autumn series, I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. The anonymous buyer who requested the Autumn series specifically. Marcus nodded. I saw them at your exhibition last fall. I was there, Emma, in the back of the gallery, watching you talk to collectors about your work. You were radiant, so passionate and articulate about your art. I was proud of you in a way that had nothing to do with business success or financial achievement. I was proud because you had found your voice, created something meaningful, built a life that fulfilled you. But you didn't approach me that night. I didn't think I had the right. I had forfeited that right when I chose my career over our relationship. But I couldn't stop myself from buying the paintings, from keeping some small piece of your creative spirit in my life. The waiter appeared to check on our untouched meals, and Marcus waved him away with an apologetic smile. The restaurant was beginning to empty around us. Other diners finishing their conversations and heading out into the cool October night, but I felt like we were suspended in time, caught in a moment that would determine the entire trajectory of our future. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. What do you want from me, Marcus? I want a chance, he said simply. Not to go back to what we had. I know that's impossible, but a chance to show you who I've become, who I'm trying to become. I want to earn your trust again, if that's possible. I want to build something new with you, something better than what we had before. And if I say no, if I tell you that some things can't be fixed, some chances can't be earned back, pain flickered across his face, but he didn't look away. Then I'll respect that decision and I'll leave you alone, just like I promised. But Emma, I've spent 3 years learning to live without you, and it's not living at all. It's just existing, going through the motions, marking time until something better comes along. But nothing better is coming, because there's nothing better than what we had together. The snow started falling as we sat there in silence, fat flakes drifting past the restaurant window like something out of a romantic movie. But this wasn't a movie, and there were no guarantees about happy endings. This was real life, with all its complications and consequences, and the very real possibility that some hearts, once broken, can never be completely repaired. 3 weeks later, I found myself trapped in the café with Marcus during the worst November blizzard Boston had seen in decades. The storm had come up suddenly, catching everyone off guard. 1 minute the sky was overcast but manageable. The next minute the wind was howling and snow was falling so hard you couldn't see the building across the street. The city had shut down public transportation, and even walking was dangerous in the whiteout conditions. "Looks like we're stuck," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from my table like this was a normal afternoon chat rather than an emergency situation. Most of the other customers had left when the storm warnings intensified, and now it was just us, the barista who was nervously checking weather updates on her phone, and the eerie sound of wind rattling the windows. "This is not happening," I muttered, watching the snow pile up against the glass. "This is absolutely not happening." "What's wrong with being stuck here?" Marcus asked. "It's warm, there's coffee, and the company isn't terrible." I shot him a look that could have melted the snow outside. "The company is the problem, Marcus. I've been doing so well, keeping my distance, maintaining boundaries, and now we're trapped together like some kind of disaster movie setup. Would it help if I promised to stay on my side at the cafe?" "Nothing would help," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I could feel the fight going out of me. Maybe it was the storm creating a weird kind of intimacy, or maybe it was exhaustion from weeks of avoiding him. But suddenly, I was too tired to maintain the anger that had been my shield for so long. The barista, a college student named Jessica, who had probably never experienced a blizzard like this, was clearly getting anxious about being stuck at work. Marcus, in what I was beginning to recognize as typical fashion, took charge of the situation with calm efficiency. He called the cafe owner to explain the circumstances, helped Jessica contact her roommates to let them know she was safe, and even figured out how to work the complicated espresso machine so we could make fresh coffee while we waited out the storm. "You don't have to take care of everyone," I told him, as he delivered a perfectly crafted latte to Jessica's table near the front counter. "I'm not taking care of everyone," he said, settling back into his chair across from me. "I'm taking care of people I care about who happen to be stuck in a blizzard. There's a difference." "Since when do you care about random college students?" "Since I realized that caring about people, actually caring, not just networking or strategizing, is what makes life worth living." "Jessica reminds me of you at that age, actually. Bright, independent, a little scared but trying not to show it." I studied his face in the soft cafe lighting, looking for signs of manipulation or calculated charm. But all I saw was genuine concern and something that looked like contentment. "You really have changed, haven't you?" "I've been trying to," he said. "The question is whether you can see it, or if I've burned that bridge so completely that there's no way back across it." Outside, the storm intensified, and I could hear tree branches creaking under the weight of the snow. Inside, the cafe felt like a cocoon, warm and isolated from the chaos of the world. Jessica had put on some soft jazz music, and the sound of coffee brewing mixed with the wind outside to create a strangely peaceful atmosphere. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. "Anything." "That night you broke up with me over the phone. Did you practice what you were going to say? Did you rehearse it like a business presentation?" Marcus was quiet for so long that I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, I wrote notes. I practiced different scenarios based on how you might react. I treated ending our engagement like a corporate merger that had fallen through." The honesty of his answer hit me harder than any lie would have. "God, Marcus, I know how awful that sounds, how cold and calculating. But Emma, I was 22 and terrified and completely in over my head. I thought if I could just approach it like a business decision, it would hurt less for both of us. I thought I could minimize the damage by being efficient about it." "It wasn't efficient," I said. "It was devastating. I know that now. I knew it the minute I hung up the phone and realized what I had done, but by then it was too late. You wouldn't take my calls, you'd blocked me on social media, and I convinced myself that you were better off without me anyway." I pulled my sweater tighter around myself, not because I was cold but because I needed some kind of armor against the vulnerability in his voice. "I spent 6 months in therapy after you left," I said, "learning how to trust my own judgment again. How to believe that I was worth more than being someone's backup plan." "You were never my backup plan," he said fiercely. "You were always my first choice, my only choice. I was just too young and stupid and scared to prioritize you over everything else I thought I wanted. But you did prioritize everything else. You chose Goldman Sachs and 7 figures and networking events over building a life with me. I chose what I thought was security, he corrected what I thought was the responsible thing to do. My parents always told me that love was a luxury you could only afford after you had established your career, secured your financial future. I thought I was being mature, taking care of our long-term interests, without consulting me, without giving me a choice in my own future. Without consulting you, he agreed, and that was the biggest mistake of all. Not leaving for New York, not taking the job, but making those decisions without consulting you, he agreed, and that was the biggest mistake of all. Not leaving for New York, not taking the job, but making those decisions unilaterally, like you were just an accessory to my life instead of my partner. The wind outside had picked up even more, and I could see Jessica nervously checking the weather app on her phone every few minutes. The snow was now piled halfway up the cafe windows, creating an almost surreal sense of isolation from the outside world. I kept the ring, Marcus said suddenly, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear him over the storm. What? The engagement ring I never gave you. The one I bought during our senior year but never had the chance to present because everything fell apart so quickly. I kept it. It's been in my apartment all these years, still in the original box. I stared at him, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet again. Why would you tell me that? Because I want you to know that leaving you wasn't easy. For me, it wasn't some cold business decision that I made and moved on from. I carried the weight of what I had done with me every single day. That ring was a reminder of the life I had thrown away, the woman I had lost because I was too cowardly to choose love over ambition. Stop, I said, but there was less force behind the word than there had been weeks ago. You can't just say things like that and expect me to forget 3 years of pain. I don't expect you to forget anything, he said. I don't expect forgiveness or second chances or happy endings. But I need you to know that losing you broke me, Emma, completely, and everything I've achieved since then has felt hollow because the one person I wanted to share it with wasn't there. The lights flickered as a particularly strong gust of wind shook the building, and Jessica let out a small yelp of alarm from her table near the counter. Marcus immediately got up to check on her, helping her find the emergency flashlights the café kept behind the register and reassuring her that the storm would pass, that we were safe and warm and had enough supplies to wait it out. Watching him with Jessica, I was struck by how different this version of Marcus was from the man I had known in college. The old Marcus would have been impatient with her anxiety, would have seen her fear as weakness or inefficiency. This Marcus was gentle, reassuring, genuinely concerned about her well-being, even though she was essentially a stranger. It was a small thing, but it spoke to a fundamental shift in who he was as a person. "You're good with her," I said when he returned to our table. "She's scared." Being scared in a situation like this is completely rational. I remember what it was like to be that age and feel like you had to handle everything on your own. You were never scared when we were in college. You always seemed so confident, so sure of yourself. Marcus's laugh was rueful. I was terrified every single day, terrified of failure, terrified of not living up to my potential, terrified of disappointing everyone who believed in me. That's why I made so many mistakes. I was operating from a place of fear instead of love. And now I'm still terrified, he admitted, but for different reasons. Now I'm terrified of spending the rest of my life without you. I'm terrified that I've damaged us so badly that there's no way to repair what we had. I'm terrified that you'll never be able to trust me again. And honestly, I wouldn't blame you if that's the case. The vulnerability in his admission made something crack open inside my chest. This wasn't the smooth, calculated Marcus Wellington who had charmed his way through Harvard Business School. This wasn't the cold, ambitious man who had broken my heart over a phone call. This was someone I had never met before, someone who was willing to admit his fears, to acknowledge his mistakes, to sit in discomfort rather than trying to control every aspect of the situation. "I don't know how to do this," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I don't know how to let you back in without protecting myself. I don't know how to trust you again after what happened before." "You don't have to know," Marcus said gently. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. We can figure it out together, one day at a time, if you're willing to try." "What does that even look like? What are you asking from me?" "Coffee," he said, and I could see the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm asking for coffee dates, conversations, the chance to show you who I am now, not just tell you. No pressure, no expectations, no grand romantic gestures that might backfire. Just time together." Getting to know each other again. That's it. That's everything, he said. Emma, I don't need you to love me again right away. I don't need promises or commitments or declarations of forgiveness. I just need a chance to prove that I'm worth the risk. That we're worth the risk. Outside, the wind was beginning to die down slightly, though the snow was still falling steadily. Jessica had found a deck of cards behind the counter and was playing solitaire, looking much calmer now that she had something to occupy her hands. The cafe felt like a snow globe, a perfect little world isolated from everything else, where normal rules didn't apply and anything seemed possible. I have conditions, I said finally, but Marcus leaned forward slightly, hope flickering in his gray eyes. Name them. Complete honesty. No strategic omissions, no carefully worded half-truths, no protecting me from information you think might upset me. If we're going to do this, I need to know that you're being genuine with me, not just telling me what you think I want to hear. Done. No trying to fix my life or solve my problems unless I specifically ask for help. I've built something good here, something that's entirely my own, and I won't let you steamroll over it with your good intentions. Understood? And no assumptions about where this is leading. Just because I'm willing to have coffee with you doesn't mean we're getting back together. It doesn't mean I've forgiven you. It just means I'm curious about who you've become. Marcus nodded seriously. Those are fair conditions. More than fair, actually. Then we can try, I said, the words feeling both momentous and terrifyingly casual. We can try being friends first and see what happens from there. The smile that spread across Marcus's face was like sunrise after a long, dark night, gradual, warm, transformative. It wasn't the confident, practiced smile he had worn in college or the cold, professional expression he had perfected in the corporate world. It was something entirely new, something that seemed to come from a place of genuine joy rather than strategic advantage. Thank you, he said quietly. Thank you for giving me a chance I probably don't deserve. You probably don't, I agreed. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is figuring out who we are now, as different people than we were 3 years ago, and seeing if those people can build something together. The storm continued for several more hours, but somehow, the time passed quickly. We talked about everything and nothing. My latest commission pieces, his transition from corporate law back to Boston, Jessica's major in environmental science, and her concerns about climate change. Normal conversations, the kind that people who were getting to know each other might have, without the weight of our complicated history pressing down on every word. When the snow finally stopped, and the city plows began clearing the streets, it felt like emerging from a dream, the outside world rushing back in, demanding attention, reminding us that whatever had happened in this isolated bubble would have to survive contact with reality. I should probably get home, I said as Jessica began the process of closing up the cafe for the night. Check on my apartment. Make sure the pipes didn't freeze. Can I walk you? Marcus asked. The sidewalks are going to be treacherous, and I'd feel better knowing you made it home safely. The old me would have bristled at the suggestion, would have seen it as an attempt to control or manage me. But this felt different, less about protecting his investment and more about genuine concern for someone he cared about. Okay, I said, but just to the front door. No coming up, no extended goodbyes, no testing the boundaries we just established. Just to the front door, he agreed. The walk home was surreal, through streets transformed by the storm into something magical and unfamiliar. Boston had been buried under nearly 2 feet of snow, turning familiar landmarks into abstract sculptures and muffling all the usual urban noise. Our footsteps crunched softly in the snow, and our breath created small clouds in the frigid air. It's beautiful, I said, pausing to look at the way the streetlights illuminated the falling snow that was still drifting down occasionally. It is, Marcus agreed, but when I glanced over at him, he wasn't looking at the snow-covered city. He was looking at me, with an expression so tender and full of longing that it made my chest tighten. Don't, I said softly. Don't what? Don't look at me like that, like I'm something precious that you've been searching for your entire life. It's too much, too fast. I can't help how I look at you, Emma. But I can promise not to act on it until you're ready, if you're ever ready. We reached my building without incident, and true to his word, Marcus stopped at the front door. But as I fumbled with my keys, cold fingers clumsy with the metal, he reached out to steady my hands with his own. Emma, he said, and there was something urgent in his voice that made me look up at him. What? I need you to know something. What happened tonight? Being trapped together, talking like we used to. It didn't change anything about my feelings for you. I'm still completely, desperately in love with you. But it also didn't change anything about my commitment to respecting your boundaries and earning your trust. I just needed you to know that both things can be true at the same time. I stared up at him, snow still clinging to his dark hair, his gray eyes serious and intent. 3 months ago, if someone had told me that Marcus Wellington would be standing outside my apartment building declaring his love in the middle of a blizzard, I would have laughed in their face. Now, it felt like the most natural thing in the world and the most terrifying thing imaginable, all at the same time. I know, I said finally. I can see it in how you look at me, how you talk to me. And Marcus, it scares the hell out of me. Why? Because part of me still loves you too. Part of me never stopped loving you, no matter how hard I tried to convince myself otherwise. And that's the part that's most dangerous, because that's the part that could get hurt again. Marcus's eyes closed briefly, like he was absorbing the weight of my admission. When he opened them again, there were tears there that he didn't bother to hide. I won't hurt you again, he said. I know that's just words right now, and I know I have to prove it through actions. But Emma, I swear to you, I will never again choose anything over you. Not business, not money, not security, not anything. You can't promise that, I said. Life is complicated, Marcus. There will be difficult choices, competing priorities. You can't promise that I'll always come first. No, he agreed. But I can promise that you'll always be part of the decision. That we'll face those difficult choices together, as a team, the way we should have done before. I managed to get my key in the lock, and the door swung open to reveal the warm lobby of my building, safe harbor after the storm, both literal and metaphorical. Thank you for walking me home, I said. Thank you for letting me. I'll see you at the cafe tomorrow, if you want me there. I considered this, standing in the doorway between the cold night and my warm apartment, between the past that had hurt me and the future that remained uncertain. I want you there, I said finally. 3 o'clock, like always. We can start with coffee and see where it goes from there. The smile that lit up Marcus's face could have powered the entire city. 3 o'clock, he agreed. And Emma, thank you for the second chance, for your honesty, for being brave enough to try again, even though I don't deserve it. We'll see if you deserve it, I said, but there was no coldness in the words. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Emma. I watched through the lobby window as he walked away into the snowy night, his figure gradually disappearing into the swirling white. Then I climbed the stairs to my apartment, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by my own window, looking out at the storm-transformed city and wondering what I had just gotten myself into. 6 months later, I was standing in Marcus's apartment, a converted warehouse space in the South End, with exposed brick walls and enormous windows that flooded the room with morning light. The space was nothing like the sterile corporate apartment he had maintained in New York. This felt like a home, warm and lived in, with comfortable furniture and fresh flowers, and my paintings hanging on the walls like they belonged there. Can't believe you bought all 4 of these, I said, standing in front of the autumn series that had launched my career as a serious artist. They look so different here than they did in the gallery. They look like they're home, Marcus said, coming up behind me with 2 cups of coffee, like they were always meant to be here. It had been a slow process, these 6 months of getting to know each other again. Coffee dates that turned into long walks through the public garden, dinners at quiet restaurants where we could talk without interruption, art gallery openings where Marcus would stand quietly in the background, letting me network and discuss my work without inserting himself into conversations, movies and bookstore browsing, and all the normal, mundane activities that couples do when they're building something real and sustainable rather than just chasing passion. There had been setbacks, moments when the old fears resurged and I would withdraw, convinced that this was all an elaborate performance that would end as soon as Marcus got bored or found something more interesting to pursue. There had been arguments, too, when his natural tendency to take charge would clash with my hard-won independence, forcing us to navigate boundaries and expectations in real time. But there had also been moments of startling intimacy, when I would catch glimpses of the man Marcus had become and feel my heart skip with possibility. The way he listened to my stories about difficult clients without immediately jumping to solutions. The way he remembered small details about my friends and asked about them in later conversations. The way he supported my decision to expand my studio space even though it meant I would be less available for evening dates. What are you thinking about? He asked, settling onto the couch and patting the cushion beside him. How different this is, I said, curling up next to him but maintaining my own space, my own coffee cup, my own comfortable independence from before. I mean, how much more sustainable it feels. Good different or bad different? Good different, better different. Before, it felt like we were always performing for each other, trying to be the perfect boyfriend and girlfriend. Now it feels like we're just us, flawed and complicated and real. Marcus set down his coffee and turned to face me fully. Emma, there's something I've been wanting to ask you, something I've been thinking about for weeks, but wasn't sure if it was too soon. My heart started beating faster, and I could feel the familiar surge of panic that came whenever it seemed like Marcus might be pushing for more than I was ready to give. What? I want to know if you'd be interested in taking a trip with me. Nothing dramatic or romantic, just a long weekend somewhere we can be completely alone, away from Boston and all the history here. I thought maybe we could drive up to Vermont, find some little inn in the mountains, just spend time together without any distractions. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agendas, but all I saw was genuine hope and a willingness to accept whatever answer I gave him. As friends who are figuring things out? I asked. As whatever we are right now, he said. No pressure to define it or make it more than what it is. Just time and space and the chance to see how we are together when we're not performing for the rest of the world. Separate rooms, he agreed, without hesitation. I'm not trying to seduce you into anything, Emma. I'm just trying to spend time with the woman I'm falling in love with all over again. The phrase, falling in love with all over again, hit me like a gentle wave, washing over me with warmth and possibility, because that's exactly what this felt like. Not the rekindling of an old flame, but the discovery of something entirely new between two people who had grown and changed and learned from their mistakes. Okay, I said, let's go to Vermont. The smile that spread across Marcus's face was radiant, transformative. Really, but I'm driving myself, and I'm paying for my own room, and if at any point I want to come back early, we come back early. No questions, no arguments, no trying to change my mind. Deal, he said, leaning over to kiss my forehead gently. Thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for making it safe to trust you. What do you think about second chances in love? Have you ever given someone who hurt you another opportunity to prove they've changed? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this emotional journey, please subscribe to the channel because I have so many more stories about love, heartbreak, and the courage it takes to try again. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. It's going to be incredible.